So, classes and constructors. That's what this video is about. I'm going to create a class. We're going to create a class of type person. I'm going to model it after myself. It doesn't need a main method. So, what is a class? What is a class file? Why does it matter? Why are we talking about it? How does it fit in the whole idea of programming and all these tools that we're learning about? Well, a class file is a description of the attributes, behavior, properties of an object. The description of the attributes and behavior, data and behavior of an object. Now, in programming, that doesn't really make any sense because you're just learning about it. You're not really sure what objects are. So let's Google it. What are objects? This is a good example of where programming has done really well, and it's trying to model the real world. We're trying to take this idea of objects in the real world. There's a collection of penises. Objects in the real world, there's a banana, and write a class file. So in looking at these objects, how does the class file relate? Well, if we use this example of, well, let's pick something here. This gold banana. It has things that we can say about it, characteristics. It doesn't have any really behavior. It might have a weight, might have a color, might have a type of fruit. There's certain inherent information about it. Take this watch, for example. Same thing. It might have a color. It might be made up of different parts. It might have inherent information related to it. Its behavior, for example, in this case, this is a moving hand. That doesn't actually look like a clock. That looks like a thermostat or a thermometer. But all these objects in the real world have inherent properties or information about the object. So that's how this relates to code. We write a class file, which is going to create an instance of an object. The class file is going to define that object. So let's continue with this. This person. What does a person have? Well, and I'll model it after myself. Well, I have a name. I have an age. And the type of my age is not 5.6. It's 34. Might even have a weight, if we really wanted to get into that. Any other information that pertains to numbers. Hair color. Well, we know that that's a word. I have a height. Now my height is not type integer. It's 5'8", so that's going to be type double. What else? Can we think of anything else? Maybe skin color? Race? Whole bunch of stuff. But we're going to keep it simple. We're going to just go with some basic information. 2 attributes. 2 properties about me. My name and my age. Don't really need anything else. Well, this class file is cool because it can hold that information, but there needs to be a way to set that information and to get that information. And that's where this concept of setters and getters come from. Now, I could write them myself. Or I could use the built-in function with Eclipse, which lets us generate setters and getters. Get age, set name, set game. Get name, set name. And these methods will do kind of what it sounds like they'll do. They'll get the information and they'll set the information. Now we're not really complete, because starting out when there's an instance of me created or an instance of this person class created, we should be able to set it initially when we first create the object. There should be a way to set it. Set it in what's called or known as a usable state. And that's where this constructor comes in. It starts with the word public because other things have to have access to it. Then it's exactly the same name as the class file. Parentheses and curly braces. Now, you'll see me do this a lot. If I'm making a method, I generally give the name, and then I use parentheses and curly braces right there. The reason for this is it cuts down on 90% of the errors. I don't have to go back and be like, oh, I missed a bracket. It's going to need it anyways, so I just include it right from the beginning. Then I don't have to think about it. And essentially, I've trained myself to always include this, and it feels weird if I'm not doing that, because I know that it's going to have it anyways, so I might as well get it out of the way. You might as well get the code writing out of the way for you know it's going to have to be there anyways, quickly, and then you can get on to actual programming of more code. Now, we've covered parameters in another video and arguments, but it's just information we're going to give this constructor. So the first thing I want them to do is give me a name, or give the person a name. And the next thing is, well, set the age. Now that's cool, they give us that information. Now we have to put it somewhere. So this refers to the class dot name, referring to this variable here, equals set name, referring to this here, and then this referring to the class name, dot age equals set age, and that's it. Now this is what's referred to as an inline comment. Inline because it generally goes at the end of a line of code. You'll see that when I write comments, I like to put it a lot of times right above the thing. It's just a little tag, a little note, a little message to me saying that what the thing is that I'm about to look at. Essentially training myself in the way that the computer is going to process lines of code. The next thing that follows is a constructor. And that is, in fact, the next thing that follows. I don't have to say this constructor or the class's constructor because it obviously pertains to the class file, because a constructor is a special method that is connected to the class file. Now, by default, there's one that's passed automatically. It's created. We're not going to get into right now overloading methods and constructors, because you just want to get familiar with the basics and get comfortable with that. Once you have that stuff kind of under your belt, it becomes easy to start adding new information related to those things you're comfortable with, because you're just adding to it. You're enhancing it. You're expanding it. It's like, well, the constructor 1.0 would actually look like this. No code inside it. It's just by default. That's what happens. Well, we've overloaded the constructor by giving it information that we want it to deal with. Or rather, we've redefined the default constructor. I'm using a simple one-line inline comment just to describe this block of crap here. It's not crap. It's relevant. It's needed. It's important. But essentially, I'm trying to give comments that are relevant to the next code that you're going to see, and it's short and kind of to the point. Setters and getters. What else needs to be said? And if you know what setters and getters are, that's all you need to know. So let's now we have our person class. Let's save this, and let's go to our test class. So let's say we want to make a person. How do you do that? How do you make an instance of type person? You start with the name of the class file, exactly as it's spelt. Then you give it a name. Now, notice I'm going with a lowercase. This is a variable. Variables always start with lowercases. We could even call this person Brian. Or we could even give it that person Brian. But I like to be known as my name. Who's that person? Well, they're Brian. That's who they are. Equals, and then we create a new instance of that class. So you start with the keyword new, and then the name of the class file, and then the special parameters, the parentheses, which are arguments. It's expecting that. Now in Clips, if you mouse over that, it's going to tell you what it's expecting, what type of arguments. So it says add arguments to match person string int. In this case, we don't want it to add them automatically. We know what it is. The first thing is a name. And the next thing is my age. Not 43. And that's it. So now, how can we get that? We can use this variable Brian. If we just run it, that's really strange. Well, that's what's stored in the memory location of this variable, all that information. Not really fun. Brian dot get name. Let's run that. Well, that says my full name. This dot operator basically says go inside of this variable or in this class file and look for a method named this. This is the method name. And then run that method. Now remember, methods are just recipes, lists of instructions. If we go back to the person class and we find the get name, this is the line of code that's going to be run when this method is called. Actually, that's the set one. That's the wrong one. This is one. It's going to return the value inside this variable. We say, well, I don't remember in here, and I don't see where we use the word Brian Irwin. I don't see that. Well, when we created this instance here, the constructor is this portion right here. We passed in a name and an age. And if we look in our person class, inside the constructor, it expects two arguments. The first one is the type string, and the next one is type int. And we know because we gave them descriptive names, the first one is a name, and the next one is an age. And that's it. That's all you really need to know about classes for now. We'll get into more later on as it's relevant, but for now, that's it. That's the basics of classes and how to think about them.